Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sero Boost, the Happiness Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the podcast.
Lou, thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us in the studio today. It has been a while, since we could actually do anything in person. So this is, it feels quite special. And hopefully you feel the same way. The energy is different compared to a Zoom call, isn't
I agree,
it?
definitely.
Yeah. So we are here today, and the podcast is all about happiness. But in today's context, we are talking to you because you've written, as you mentioned earlier, quite a few books. And one of them that really stood out to us is about self-acceptance. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we go into that, we would love for you to introduce yourself to listeners so everyone could understand you a little bit better, both as a professional and also as a human.
Sure, happy to. You cut me off when I've said enough. So I was born in the United States, New York, you can tell by my accent. And I trained as a psychologist in education and then joined Melbourne University a long time ago within the Melbourne Graduate School of Education. Yeah. I also have worked at California State University as a professor. And my professional interest has always been on people's both well-being and their job performance. And the area that I'm really interested in professionally is their psychological resources that help people go from, A to A plus, help them cope with stress, help them cope with difficult people. So it's the internal world of people. And I'm interested in 3 and 4-year-olds, and I'm also interested in older people. I've written a book that was just published last year called The High Performance Mindset at Work, Home, and Life, which probably summarizes my work in this area. Personally, I'm a father of 2 grown-up children, married. Kids are not on drugs or anything, so I haven't stumbled too much in the parenting area. They seem to be reasonably happy. I had a walk with my son today, as we do once a week for an hour, and I love my work. It's my passion in life. My passion is helping really translate psychology in a way that people can use it in their own lives to make a difference.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. It's great to hear, for people to be so passionate about their work and at the same time to understand you better as you mentioned, a father, a husband. I think it's great for us to talk about the topic because, we understand you a little better now. And today we're talking about self-acceptance because you actually have one of the books on this topic, topic. And we'll talk about that in a little bit later. But before we go into that, we always do an activity we call rapid fire.
Right
so
on.
We get to know your interests a little more and perhaps get some really good recommendations from you. So are you ready?
Let's go.
Alrighty, let's do it. So the first thing we would love to know from you is a book.
A book. I'm reading and really enjoying Renegades. So Renegades is a book that was done with Barack Obama after his presidency and Bruce Springsteen, the actor, the singer-actor, mostly singer, of course. And it's a compilation of their podcast together that was transcribed. And it was really a documentation of their individual journeys, either in the music world or the political world. They're both highly successful, but very different. And their journey really coincided with some pretty big changes in the social fabric of the United States. So there was a relevance to their own personal stories. They could connect them And plus, it was a time that I was living there.
Yeah.
And so it's a great book, and that's probably the last one I've read and enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting because, Barack Obama has amazing stories. I'm trying to keep up and catch up on some of the podcasts and books about him as well. So, it's great to hear another recommendation. Number 2, we would love to know about a movie that you would recommend.
No Time to Die.
Oh, I love No Time to Die. It's so good. It has a feminist twist on it as well, which is something I really enjoy. So,
it's great escapism. I've loved all the Bond movies.
Yeah.
I love the music. I love the silliness to it. So I probably see the ones that I like, which is all of them at least 2 or 3 times. So that's the last cab off the rank, and enjoyed that quite a bit.
Yeah, it was really well done, and I must say some twists and turns, but no spoilers here for listeners. If you haven't watched it, go and watch. It's really great. And the next one we would love to know about you is a podcast that you perhaps listened to recently.
I'm not a big podcaster, to be honest. I get my information from news sources and media, or newspapers. So a while back, I used to do podcasts. My family does podcasts, but they do it largely when they're exercising.
Yeah.
They use that time. And for me, my exercise time, I need to turn my mind off from stimulation and, discussions. And I think I became saturated with podcasts during the presidential campaign of Trump and Biden, and then also with the COVID. And so I just need a little peace at the moment. And so I'm not podcasting at the moment.
Yeah, it's only fair. I think I was the same. Even though I'm doing podcasts, it's not like I listen to it every day.
Yeah.
So I totally hear you. Sometimes you just need to switch off and, get news elsewhere, or, learn through reading, perhaps.
Yep.
That's great. And next one we would love to know from you is your famous role model.
Well, there's a very famous psychologist whose work I endorse and have internalized, and is in all of my work marries with and takes from the work of someone called Ellis, who's no longer with us. But he was a super bright, amazing person that educated me and everyone about the role of outlook and mindset on emotions and behaviors. And so the modeling that he provided me was not necessarily a personal, close modeling as we tend to think about it, but it was the integrity of his intellect to really drill down in this area. And his contribution was significant at the time, because his contribution, Lou, was helping people understand that their well-being and mental health was not as much a function of the way their parents brought them up, was not as much a function of their environment, but was much more so the way they looked at and thought about their environment, their mindset, their beliefs. And he helped us understand that people have both an emotional, irrational way of looking at things and a rational, sensible way. And getting people to be aware of the choices they have has had a lasting impact on me. And I teach that lesson to very young people all the way up.
Oh, that's amazing. And it seems like that's something that you learn through your work, and this is a role model that you admire too in your particular field as well. So it's a bit different from like, this is a singer that I really love, and this is something different, definitely. I know it's been a while, pandemic and whatnot, but actually a lot of people spend time learning, and we're all lifelong learners. So what is a course that you have recently completed?
Look, you're lucky to get a podcast that I've listened to learn something. It's rare that I don't do course courses.
Yep.
I write them.
Yeah. which might be
I
tricky.
think I've just become a little bit more impatient and with, what it is I want to learn and what I need to learn.
Yeah.
And I go after it in a targeted way.
Yeah.
I'm not good at taking a course on how to cook or how to improve your memory or I don't think I can give you a positive answer to that one.
That's all good. We learn in different ways.
Yeah.
Perhaps just a new skills in a class. It doesn't have to be a course.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Sometimes we want bite-sized knowledge that targets to what we need at that moment or in a particular period. So,
But probably the one that it wasn't exactly what you're looking for is I do Pilates classes
Yeah.
twice a week.
Yeah.
And that helps me learn so much about my body and learning how to manage it has never been a strong point.
Yeah.
So that I consider it not only to be good exercise, but I'm much more aware and educated about myself in that area.
Yeah, that is a kind of course in itself. Is it reformer Pilates that you do? Yeah, great. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. We've learned a little more about you and your interest, and some of the things that you share might not be everybody's taste, but, great recommendations. And I would love to look into some of those as well. And now we're going to talk about self-acceptance. And we always start by talking about a practice before we talk about the research, the insights, because we want to know something that is really realistic, something that you actually do, and perhaps listener could pick that up as well.
Sure.
So the first thing we would love to know from you is, what is a practice that you do for yourself to cultivate self-acceptance?
When I'm faced with negativity, criticism, lack of achieving my goals, I've trained myself as much as humanly possible not to take it personally.
I love that.
So
It's hard.
That's the practice.
Yeah.
And that's part of what self-acceptance is.
Yeah.
So you don't practice it like once a day. Once you get it, you apply it when you need it, which we can go into a bit more as we talk about what self-acceptance is.
Yeah.
But, for people that are listening to this, life is full of muddles and puddles, and it's full of things that happen that are frustrating, and sometimes those things cast a poor light on ourselves. We weren't as responsible as we could have been. We didn't work as hard as we could have been. We said something we shouldn't have said. We got, hauled over the coals for not doing our job properly. And those events can have a big impact in terms of your happiness at work.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the sort of psychological armor that you can equip yourself with and build yourself up with so that when those things happen, you try to learn from them so that they don't happen again, but you protect yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you take those things personally, as many people do of all ages, it's hard for you to even admit that you were at fault because it hurts so much.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think it's not just applicable to work. It applies to all different areas of life. And one of the analogies that I've been really enjoying is you are like a mirror ball. You just, people, when it comes to interact with you, whenever something happened, of course, you're not always right, but most of the time you're the mirror ball. They just project on you as well. So you'll be able to show people what they're actually projecting and vice versa. So we're all mirror balls in different ways. And I find that to be very interesting because it helps when it comes to not taking things personally. And the practice that you just mentioned, I definitely see that there would be a lot of benefits, but we would love to know about at least 3 benefits that you would see for this practice for people.
Fewer negative emotions, such as anxiety and feeling down.
Yeah.
more positive emotions, such as feeling fulfilled and enjoying experience. And thirdly, we all have a sort of innate part of us that wants to grow and develop.
Yeah.
So a famous psychologist, I'm sounding very academic. I don't actually, I'm not that way. But now that you've asked me.
You are an academic, though.
Yeah, true. So Maslow talked about self-actualization.
Yeah.
Which means that discovering yourself, what it is about yourself that's unique, and developing those parts of yourself, that's a higher level need we have after we've satisfied our need for security and love and a few other basic needs. So the third benefit is that self-acceptance really provides you with the confidence and willingness to explore aspects of life that you might have avoided earlier because you were afraid you might not do them very well, or people might think you're a bit silly.
Yeah.
Once you can eliminate that fear through self-acceptance, you're able to develop more of yourself as a person.
Yeah. That's really great.
How's that?
Yeah, that is great.
Can we bottle that?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's great because a lot of the time we don't really relate not taking things personally with self-acceptance. And in this practice, you mentioned that, those are the benefits, and essentially that brings you self-acceptance, and it brings you a lot of joy and happiness as well. And I think when we talk about practicing these things, it sounds really easy, especially when you practice it for a while, for yourself. And for a lot of people, it is hard. So what are some of the challenges that you notice people could encounter when they start to practice not taking things personally?
Well, look, excuse me, that's the practice, but I do think, and I don't know if it's the time to do it or not now, it's important for people to understand what it is before they can practice it.
Yeah.
So could we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so self-acceptance is like an attitude people have or can have towards themselves and also towards their self-worth. So generally, self-acceptance means you have an affirmation or acceptance of yourself under all conditions, in spite of your imperfections and your fallibilities and the difficult parts of yourself.
Yeah.
So self-acceptance means accepting yourself just the way you are. And the third part of it is that you avoid the self-criticism of yourself and not evaluating your self-worth based on what people think of you, how well you are achieving or not, the behavior of your kids, whether you get your promotion, what your body image, that there's an absence of self-evaluation of self-worth that comes with self-acceptance. And I think it's important for people to understand that idea. Let me illustrate this idea maybe in a different way for you if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So imagine we would have a basket of fruit.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's in the basket of fruit.
Yeah.
And you reach into the basket of fruit and you pick out a peach. And it's a beautiful peach, delicious and juicy.
Yeah.
How would you rate the value of that bowl of fruit based on that piece?
Well, 10 out of 10.
Right, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Then you picked out another piece of fruit and it was banana, and you opened it up and you noticed that it was a bit rotten inside and soft. How do you rate the overall value of that basket of fruit?
Now it's probably a 7.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you continue to pull out different pieces of fruit, some of which are amazing, some of which are okay, and some of which aren't very good, what have you discovered about this overall basket of fruit? It's a mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
Would it make sense to evaluate the overall quality of that basket of fruit as a good one or a bad one? Would it make sense given how much of a mixed bag it is? What would you use to judge it?
Yeah.
You'd have to say, it's only the peaches that I'm going to judge the value on.
Yeah.
But that's so arbitrary.
Yeah.
So in a similar way, does it really make sense to evaluate your worth as a person based on aspects of you that are either negative or positive? It doesn't make any sense, because you could be a great interviewer at work. You could be, but there might be another area that you're not very good at.
Yeah.
Or you could be a crummy interviewer and you could do your job crummily, right?
Yeah.
But you could be a great person.
Yeah.
You could be a great family person. You could do lots of things for your community.
Yeah.
But you could be crummy at work. So how are we going to rate your value as a person?
Yeah.
It's really hard to.
That is very hard.
So what Albert Ellis would say, and what I say is, as much as possible, it's really good to choose not to evaluate the whole basket of fruit yourself.
Yeah.
Based on your performance, your behavior, what others think about you, because it's so arbitrary to do that. And you have the power up to a point to stop doing it.
Yeah.
Everyone does. But the problem is there's a sort of inbuilt biological tendency for us to do it anyway. And for people that are prone to low self-esteem and depression, it's not just the way they were brought up as kids that determines this strength of, the opposite of self-acceptance is self-criticism and self-depreciation.
Yeah.
And people that have a lot of negative emotions, that tendency is really strong. They ignore their positives.
Yeah.
And they put themselves down just routinely. It's their default, and it's almost a part of their DNA. And because they do it a lot, whether it's perfectionism or not receiving the approval of others, they take it to heart. And so people that have mental health disorders, not just stress and self-esteem that ebbs and flows, they really have a strong tendency towards self-criticism and self-depreciation.
Yeah.
And so I've worked a lot over the years with kids. And it's quite interesting when you work with young people to educate them about the way their mind operates. And they don't know any of this.
Yeah.
They don't even know that the way they think about themselves affects how they feel and what they do. No one's ever taught them that.
Yeah, that's so true.
And so because of my work with young people years ago, I developed a program in schools, and your listeners can URL, you can do it, education.com.au. That's YOU, can do it, education.com.au.
Yeah.
And that's a set of programs for both school and home that teaches, helps teachers and parents educate their kids about the fact that they have choices in the way they think about themselves. And such an important lesson to learn both for yourself.
Yeah.
Like when I'm having a crappy day, like sometimes it can happen that I have an appointment and I get lost and I'm running late.
Oh.
Yeah. And
did that happen today?
Yes.
Maybe.
And whether it's my fault or not, we won't go into that. But assuming that it wasn't. Do I put myself down, or do you just say that's bad? I need to do better Googling mapping next time to do better. I have to remember that I have a choice in the way I think about myself.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really important, and I guess for your listeners, it's important too, because they're very passionate, as you are, about people you relate to, that you care about, and you're passionate about how they think about you.
Yeah.
Because it matters.
Yeah.
And you're passionate about your work or not.
Of course I am.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course we all are. Hopefully.
So there's an inclination when bad things go on, when I say bad things, when you're not successful at work or people are not approving of you, there's a tendency to take it personally.
Yep.
And with that comes a whole set of stress problems that make it harder to accept that what was it that I did with my friend, my partner, my kids at work that I could have done better.
Yeah.
And how can I improve? But if you're overwhelmed with, I'm a loser, I'm hopeless, what's wrong with me? It gets very hard to move forward beyond what's happened.
Yeah.
Now, I had this quote, which I think her name was Jakara Anthony, won the gold medal mogul at the Olympics, and she was being interviewed. Yeah. And I caught the interview, and she said something, and I went, I'm going to write that down and try to remember it. and I think the comment was, how come you're so calm, and how did you stay calm about this and leading up to everything? And she said, I know that the result that I have in my skiing does not determine my self-worth. No. And I decided I'm just going to have fun.
Wow.
And I got a shiver down my back because I thought, she has self-acceptance.
She does.
And if we can bring that every day to what we do, you know what it does to our stress? Because, our stress is so much about ourselves.
Yeah, that's so
And if you can kind of put it aside and go, when I goof up at my work for whatever reason, or with my partner, whatever, those things matter a lot. Because my goal is to be great at my work and have a great relationship. But mistakes are mistakes for whatever reason. And I'm going to work hard on understanding how I can do it better. Yeah. You don't have to take it personally. Yeah. That's what, it's difficult to be a happy person without self-acceptance, or let's put it a different way. Yeah. Self-acceptance liberates you to do those things, to experiment with those things that will bring you enjoyment and fulfillment. Yeah. And it's a very important aspect of our journey through life and our self-discovery.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. We all need that reminder every single day, I think, because life is life. Things happen no matter where it happens, could be on the way to work, could be on the way to an interview, but, it's your choice. And I think when you talked about the beauty of self-acceptance, I realized I had this conversation with a friend a long time ago, and we were kind of debating, do you think that anyone is doing their best at a certain point in time? And I went, I think so. Given the circumstances, given what they're going through, they're all doing their best. Yep. Myself included, whatever happens, right? Like in a certain situation, I know that I'm already doing the best I can. I'm doing all in my control, which is relating to the point that you just made, because, I'm doing the best. What else can I do more? And, I'm here to enjoy myself as well. And since I'm already doing the best, whatever happens, and I'll deal with the situation, and I'll come up with the solution if there are problems.
And if your best doesn't give you gold, what does that say about your self-worth?
Nothing.
Nada. Nada.
Yeah.
And so personal best it gives you happiness.
Yeah.
Except if you think it's not good enough.
Yeah.
And if you tend to say, I should be better than I am,
Yeah.
and because I'm not, what's wrong with me? Back to a bad level of self-acceptance do you go. So that's the problem.
Yeah.
You could say, yeah, I was happy with my personal best.
Yeah.
But then if that sneaky voice comes in your head and says, but I should have done better.
Yeah, you could do better.
You should have done better.
Yeah, you should have done better.
Maybe you could have, maybe you couldn't, but the should.
Yeah.
I should have.
Yeah.
And because I'm not better, and other people also can see that I'm not as good as they thought I could have been.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And that's the cycle
Yeah.
that self-depreciation is involved in.
And to make it lighter, in conversations with friends, I'm sure at one point we've already had these conversations. Oh, crap, I forgot to bring this. Oh, I didn't bring that, or I didn't prepare this. And then someone in the group will go, shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, those people are probably better at self-acceptance than the rest. And I feel like that is something we can always learn from because we're already doing the best we can. And like you said, personal best doesn't mean happiness. There will be another personal best. And what if you don't get that personal best again?
Well, personal best does contribute to happiness, except if it's not good enough for you.
Yeah. That's so true. You're the only one that needs to approve of it.
Yeah. And what people think about you doesn't make you what they think,
Yeah.
what they're thinking of you. So learning to, part of not taking things personally that people can practice every day now that I'm thinking about it are the positive self-accepting affirmations that you can practice to train the mind a little bit more.
Yep.
So coming up with a list of things, get my book, High Performance Mindset at Work. It's not very expensive and it will change your life.
Is it on Kindle? I'll get it.
But things like, I'd like to be successful, but I don't always have to be successful to be a worthwhile person.
Yeah.
I accept myself no matter what.
Yeah.
I am me and that's okay. I want people to approve of what I do, but I don't need them to.
Yeah.
I am me. Those sort of, those aren't examples of what, there's this sort of, psychology's moved over the years from studying mental health problems to studying flourishing and thriving.
Yeah.
And the field has actually been called positive psychology.
Yeah. Positive psychology.
And there is this sort of getting everyone to think positively all the time. And they talk about positive toxicity, the downside of everyone feeling they have to be happy all the time. And just having positive self-talk is enough to deliver happiness. And I must admit, I'm very skeptical of some aspects of positive psychology that ignore the powerful influence of negative thinking and helping people override that influence. That if you just sit on top of sort of self-criticism, positive thoughts for the day, it has a weaker impact.
Yeah.
So the kind of mental preparation for days have to deal with both overcoming the negative and promoting the positive. And self-acceptance, but my research says that it actually, if you learn to accept yourself no matter what, and that it helps both overcome the negative feelings and it promotes the positive feelings. So it's a really good, strong influence.
Yep.
I want to talk about something that you don't know about, but
yeah. Yeah. But I would love to learn something I have not known yet.
So I work a lot in schools in developing programs for kids, and we've just developed one that's an e-learning program.
Yeah.
Kids go through it themselves.
Yeah.
And then we have some supporting stuff for teachers and parents, but they log in and go through this program. And the program is called Accepting Myself, How to Help Young People Feel Worthwhile No Matter What.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing program.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Well, first of all, it takes place in outer space. It's not a game.
Oh.
It's instructional, but it takes place in outer space.
Oh.
And the young learner gets to pick one of two avatars to take them through the journey of self-acceptance.
Oh.
And they go through lots of, targeted activities where they learn to become aware of all their many positive qualities.
Yeah.
Their multiple intelligence, their character strengths, their interests. And so that's occurs in a planet that's called Planet Utopia.
Oh.
So they travel to Planet Utopia and they learn about all their positive qualities. And then they say, look, those things are all important. Don't think you're bragging or, they all contribute to why you're a worthwhile person no matter what.
Yeah.
And when bad stuff happens, you don't lose those things.
Yeah.
But what happens with young people as well as old people when something bad happens, either they're not aware of all their positives or they undermine how important they are.
Yeah.
That happens with kids a lot. It happens with adults a lot. They take for granted what it is they do well, just focus on what they don't do well. Yeah. And then use that as a judgment of their own self-worth. So in this program, the kids are given practice in understanding why it doesn't make sense for them to put themselves down. Partly because they have all these positive qualities, you don't lose them. Yeah. And partly because it doesn't make sense. So we have a little activity in outer space where they see a spaceport flying through space, and it's got a broken wheel on it, and so it's not able to accelerate as much. And so the avatar says to the learner, "Would it make sense to throw out this spaceport because it has a broken wheel?" And they have to drag something to fix the wheel. And they fix the wheel, and then the avatar says, "You can see it doesn't make sense to throw out the whole, scooter or whatever because it's got a broken part."
Yeah.
Does
it
make sense to junk yourself, trash yourself because there's a part of you that isn't very good?
That's true.
Once they understand that, then it's a lot easier for them to not take things personally because they understand why it doesn't make sense to. Yeah. If you just try to teach the practice without understanding the basis behind it, it doesn't. It's almost wallpapering on things, and it has a less powerful impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like that's just not just one practice, right? Because you recommended combining it with, I don't remember the exact terminology, but positive affirmations to yourself. Yeah. That'll be great to make a list, at the same time that will help you to not take things personally as well, because once you have that foundation of acknowledging the good qualities of yourself and self-affirm every single day, then you'll be less likely to take things personally.
Here's another one.
Yeah.
Hold out your hand. One of them.
One of them?
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me 4 or 5 things about yourself that you think are really good and positive.
5 things about myself.
4 or 5.
I'll give 5. Why not?
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
5 in one hand. Yeah. I am a very positive person.
Put that in your hand.
Yeah, put it in my hand. Yep. It's in my hand. I am good at what I do.
Put it in your hand.
I'm a loving friend, daughter, and person in general. Mm-hmm. I am creative. I'll put that in my hand. Yep. And I can overcome tough things.
Great.
Whatever that might be.
So, okay. So Make a fist around those things.
Yep.
Okay. Now
Holding them.
Okay. Now give me something that can happen that can kind of be a bit like something that could happen or has happened that when it happens, it can kind of get you down a little bit.
I'll give you something that happened. I broke up with a really close friend, a 10-year friendship.
Okay.
Actually, not one of them, two of them, a couple of years ago.
Right.
That broke one of the things that I just mentioned.
Okay.
So.
And that probably got you down about yourself in some respects.
Definitely.
So this technique that can be used. So in your hand.
Yeah.
I want you to bring your hand to your chest.
Yeah.
And say to yourself, I accept myself no matter what.
I accept myself no matter what.
I am me and that's okay.
I am me and that's okay.
So that's another way of just making it a little bit more real and making you aware that you don't lose those things in yourself because bad stuff happens.
Yeah.
And that you're still okay.
Yeah.
And then it's much easier to then go, okay, now what can I do next time or figure out what to do?
Yeah.
But if you lose your sense of self, it's like you're on ice skates, but you're not, it's like on a skating ring, but you're not wearing ice skates. It's hard to get across.
Yeah.
Hard to get across.
Yeah.
If you get those ice skates on, it's like the self gives you that agility, mobility, flexibility, resilience to figure out where to go next, to do what you need to do to correct things and to change course.
Yep.
And I think self-acceptance gives you that that power. And it's I sometimes describe it as psychological armor. So something happens, you screw up. And that's when you need to call. That's when self-acceptance is needed.
Yep.
If you're going cool and you're having good days with friends and family and work, self-acceptance, you don't need it. You only need it when things aren't going so well. And then having that as a strength psychologically so that when bad things happen, you go, okay, I mean, that's okay. It's like an armor. Like it's not going to get to me inside me. Yeah. And if you can protect yourself emotionally, how important is it to be able to protect yourself emotionally?
Absolutely. Super important.
And people at work, for goodness sakes, how many of you have a horrible manager that's a bit of a pig in the way they communicate to you? I don't know. I hope not.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But there might be one of you that's had a bad experience with a direct line supervisor that can be unfairly critical of you. Yeah. And when that happens, whether it's performance review, performance management, or whatever, how important is self-acceptance at that time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because without it, that person's opinion matters for promotion. Also, you care about what they think about you. It can be quite shattering.
Yeah.
Whereas if your outlook is my performance at work does not determine my self-worth, you have a little bit more, less discomfort and more calmness to listen and not take it personally. And then you can either go, you're right or you're wrong, I'm leaving, I'm staying. Whereas if it penetrates, it's really hard to know what to do to improve the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it doesn't just apply to work, right? It applies to different aspects of life as well. Something that I relate to a lot is probably family.
Yep.
Someone in the family throw a comment about you that is just absolutely not true. And you kind of go, what's going on? Like, am I actually like that?
No,
but once you already have that armor,
on.
it's kind of like, no.
Suppose it is true.
Yeah, suppose it is true.
That's where you've got to have self-acceptance.
Okay.
If
Even
it's
more
not
important?
true, you go, it's not true.
Okay.
You don't need self-acceptance because it's not true. But if what you're hearing is true, and sometimes it will be true.
Oh, there's a twist.
Well, it will be.
Yeah.
Because you're not perfect, are you?
Yeah, of course.
With your family.
Hey?
You're not perfect with your family.
Oh, no.
And you make mistakes occasionally.
Yeah, of course.
And someone can, all of us, by the way, I'm not picking on you.
No. Yeah, generally speaking.
Generally
Of course,
speaking, you
of
do
course.
generally speaking, you do very well. But for different reasons, context, timing,
Yeah.
where you're at,
Yeah.
you know, you do the wrong thing by one of them
Yeah.
a couple of times, and you get that feedback directly or indirectly. And then if you don't want to say, well, that's not true, if it is true, what they're saying about you. But then if you have self-criticism and self-depreciating, it hurts so much more and you don't know what to do. Whereas if you're self-accepting, you go, I got that. I'm not going to put myself down for it.
Yeah.
I'm still me and that's okay.
Yeah.
And now what can I do to improve the situation?
Yeah.
So you're right. It's not just important to be happy and fulfilled at work or to be miserable at work. It applies to all areas of your life.
Yeah. I'm trying to relate it to as many areas as possible because, we all struggle in different areas and work is one of them for sure. But, there are other aspects. And this is from stories I've heard recently, from discussions I've had with friends, with people. Family is a key theme, which is why I brought up family, but there might be other themes as well. So I think it's more about understanding the practice and picking up the skills to actually analyze that situation.
It's a big theme, thing, as you're thinking about themes.
Yeah.
For young people, but I think it applies to all of us.
Yeah?
Body image.
Oh, totally agree with you. 100%.
Yeah. And we spend so much time looking at ourselves in the mirror, thinking about what people think about us. And if people go, where'd you find that? Or putting on whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It's very easy to feel bad about yourself.
Yeah.
When I put on weight, which I do on a regular basis, and then I take it off.
Yeah.
I've really got to work hard at self-accepting myself.
Yeah.
As someone who's eating too much and putting on weight, getting out of shape. But sometimes it can get to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes, in fact, it's not such a bad idea because if I'm feeling so miserable about my weight and about myself because of my weight, sometimes it can motivate me to change.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's always bad, but it'd be better for me not to put myself down and have another reason, more positive reason, or opportunity to adjust my center of gravity a little bit.
So that's the practice for you in action, right? When it was not so great, but you accept it and that it motivates you to change. And I think that's another thing we haven't touched on that would be important as well, because it's not just about giving ourselves positive affirmations and ignoring the things that we should work on.
Exactly.
And that is probably the tricky part here when we have to find our balance. So I guess this, the practice, there might be some challenges, one of which is to actually try and find your balance. Some people actually might find it hard to even speak positively to themselves. So, getting into that and talk to themselves in a way that, because life's already hard, like having conversations already hard. So talking to themselves in a way that would allow them to embrace who they are while at the same time, embrace the good qualities at the same time, motivate themselves to work on areas that they know they need to work on. I find that to probably be a better way of looking at, the positive affirmations, the not taking things personally, rather than saying I'm always right and I'm always great. You know? Yeah.
No, I think that's an important part of happiness.
Yeah.
Because happiness involves taking positive actions that bring you joyful experiences, kind of see yourself at your best in different areas.
Yeah.
And, so the journey you want to plot for yourself consists of really correcting those actions that prevent you from taking positive actions or being in positive environments. Like if you're just a nerd because you're so self-centered, right?
Yeah.
And no one really, like you just have a bad rep at work because you're just talking about yourself. You're just narcissistic.
Yep.
Okay. So, and you've gotten feedback through performance reviews about, you don't listen, you're not empathic. So if you're totally self-accepting and go, I'm not putting myself down, but I'm not willing to work on those things,
Yeah.
you're not going to be as happy and fulfilled because you're not going to get the promotion.
That's so true.
And you're not going to get the affiliation with others. So there is another dimension to this, which I think you quite rightly put your finger on, which is a part of taking stock of yourself.
Yeah.
Is one is acknowledging that you do have frailties, fallibilities, areas that you don't do well, that sometimes shows up, that you have a choice to take those personally or not, knowing that when you don't take them personally, you're in a better, more mature emotional state to actually look at them and go, okay, in terms of my goal for being more fulfilled, making contributions to other people, positive feelings, just general relationships, I now need to work on myself a bit more to self-improve.
Yeah.
Whereas without that, it's a really important point you make. You won't be as happy with self-acceptance if it just results in you sitting on your duff, eating popcorn, not putting yourself down, but not doing a sort of, reality-based look at how am I traveling?
Yeah.
Are there areas of myself that I can improve in?
Absolutely.
And some people I think also are a little bit reluctant to experiment with different things that are out of their comfort zone.
Totally.
And one of the reasons is they're afraid of either what people will say, you want to do that, or I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so part of self-acceptance helps people, I think, to be more willing to experiment, to find creative pursuits that satisfy them.
Yeah.
Because you're not afraid of failure. They're not afraid of people going, don't be stupid. You want to knit? You want to knit? Yeah, I want to knit socks.
Yeah.
And I love knitting. I don't, by the way, but if I did, I wish I could. I would be fine. But no, I don't knit socks. But
yeah, it is an example. It's a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, because the sort of focus of this forum or whatever is happiness.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully from today's discussion, you can see that it's a vital part of the happiness equation.
Absolutely.
Because the three benefits are, the elimination of strong negative emotions that lead to unhappiness, the promotion of positive emotions, and because you're not worrying so much about what you're doing, you're just enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then the third part of it is this sort of balloon or release valve that enables you to take some next steps to try things that you might not have tried before because of fear.
Yeah.
But I think, as you've said, and maybe we both agree, that at the end of the day, happiness is not only a state of mind and a state of feeling, but it's also a state of action and doing things.
Yeah.
Is really important. And, hopefully people with an appreciation and an internalizing self-acceptance are more willing to take the steps that they need to have the conversations with people they need to have.
Yeah.
Without the fear of rejection.
Yeah.
They're more willing to take the steps to explore different things they could do with their life without the fear of what comes with it might not be perfect, or what will people think about me.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really undervalued, call it a psychological strength or resource. And that's what's really interesting, because, there's 5 million positive psychologists or exaggeration. There's a lot of people studying, as you can well imagine,
Yeah.
well-being and mental health all the frickin' time. You're reading stuff. But self-acceptance isn't recognized enough. So I try to, hit that drum loudly, make people aware of it.
Yeah.
And, hopefully, well, I know it helps people, reduce that emotional stress and make them a little bit more relaxed and willing to face whatever challenges they have with a more positive outlook.
Yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, that is just the practice we're talking about, right? And there's so much more because you've written a whole book on it and there's a lot of research and insights. So when we talk about self-acceptance and when we talk about the topic that we always talk about here on happiness, we always want to know from your perspective as someone who have done a lot of studies on something that is related to this topic, because each person has a really different perception and definition of happiness. You touched on it a bit earlier, but to you personally, what does happiness mean?
Well, my mind has been contaminated with what everyone's writing about it.
What about your own definition then?
Yeah, I guess it's not something that I immediately comes to mind. I'll answer the question, but I'm not striving to be happy. I'm striving professionally to make a contribution to other people's lives.
Yeah.
And that will bring me fulfillment.
Yep.
And I'm striving to be the best family person I can be with my wife and my kids. That's hard work, and it's a work in progress.
Always.
But I'm happiest when I'm giving myself to my family and being responsible and being a good communicator. So happiness is, involved in all of that, but I it's hard to just have a simple definition of what it is.
Yeah.
I think it is a sort of I think you do probably need to separate just I'm feeling happy because I'm eating chocolate.
Yeah.
From a sort of a permanent quality of feeling fulfilled as a person, connected to having kind of purpose in life.
Yeah.
And working towards the goals that you have. And when those goals are achieved and setting new ones, you have this sense of moving forward and making a difference to others that matter.
Yeah.
Is kind of what leads to happiness, a state of happiness.
Yeah. And I mean, each person has their own definition. And I think to you, what I'm hearing is it is fulfillment. It is not just, I'm feeling happy because, like I got here on time or something, So
I wonder
very
what that
different.
would feel like.
Yeah. Very different.
Yeah.
Very different things. So yeah, I totally agree. A sense of fulfillment, sense of happiness. I feel like to me, they also go hand in hand. And it's more a state of mind than just a feeling at a certain point in time.
Yes.
But a lot of people have heaps of misconceptions about happiness. On the show, we've learned about a bunch so far, but we would love to hear from you. What are some of the misconceptions you've noticed in people when they think of happiness?
Well, I think you've touched on one, which is it's a sort of a momentary state that comes from doing something that you enjoy doing. There's the whole thing of keeping up with other people. And if I'm not, how can I be happy if I'm not driving the car that everyone else is driving? I'm not going on the holidays that everyone else is having.
Yeah.
I'm not wearing the clothes that other people are wearing. I think happiness, unfortunately, has this external reference where you compare yourself with others.
Yeah.
And if your comparison is good, you feel happy. And if your comparison is not so good, you're unhappy.
Yeah.
But you're always chasing something that is elusive, because there's always someone who has something more than you. There's always something better that you can be doing at work. The next book could be better than this book, or you could look cooler, or your hair could look this, and so on. And so I think social media has made it harder to be happy, because I just think people are aware of what other people have and what we don't have. And we tend to use that as part of our happiness equation.
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten away from using a different equation for determining what matters most in our lives, and for, I think the values that you hold, and the more you live by those values of what's important, has a big bearing on your sense of happiness. And if those values fall away and you become a prisoner of economic gain and comparison with other people's financial state, I think you probably have lost the plot a little bit in terms of
So true.
of what happiness really feels like.
Yeah.
And I think happiness is a very human quality that comes more from being authentic to yourself in terms of what you feel is important.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that your achievement and what other people think about you isn't important, because it is important. But what governs the direction of your existence and your purpose in life, I think, has to be a strong value base of what matters most to you. And I grew up in a ethical humanistic school where it wasn't, it wasn't about deities and faith. It wasn't spiritual in that sense, but it was all about what it means to relate to other people in a way that our community prospers, and caring about people and listening to people. And I think it has had a indelible impact on me, but it's been very submerged, because I don't think I'm racist or sexist or ageist or and that's all a part of my the inner core value system of treating people as individuals and not judging them based on just not judging them. And that's the other side of the self-acceptance coin, is other acceptance and not judging other people.
Yeah.
And I'm probably instinctively more towards not accepting myself. I think I'm, except for obnoxious people that I could not be very tolerant of, but I think in terms of, gender and sex identity and things, there's, I think I'm much more tolerant of individuality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a nice way to tie things back in, right? Because it's, in the grand scheme of things, you look at happiness, you look at yourself, your self-acceptance, everything's interrelated. And you did mention earlier that self-acceptance, it's an important part of your happiness. And I would love to hear more from you on this, because we would love to understand and unpack it a little more. What is that relationship, and how does self-acceptance lead to happiness?
Well, I think you've squeezed the lemon pretty tight on this one already.
I know, but I think there was a point earlier when we talked about I think we discussed quite a bit on this already. I agree with you. We discussed that, self-acceptance, you accept yourself as you are. You don't necessarily want to stretch yourself too thin, and, you come as you are. So essentially, you don't sacrifice or compromise on your...
Okay, let me ask you this. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go for it.
What are the 3 benefits of self-acceptance that I've discussed today?
So less negative emotions, more positive emotions. And I think the last one, my interpretation, is a sense of expansion.
Self-discovery, self-actualization.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you think about those 3 things, do they have any relationship to happiness?
I think they're all elements of happiness.
Right. Not the full story of happiness.
Yeah.
But it does
Elements.
gobble up a lot of oxygen, doesn't it? Those 3.
Yeah.
So that's the relationship of self-acceptance to happiness is through those benefits.
There we go. That's the story, everybody. Sometimes just gotta tie it back, because we've talked about practices. We've talked about different practice, different things we can try. We try something here as well. And I think sometimes it's just good to remind listeners that, if you really want to look at that relationship, they are elements that will lead to happiness. Not everything that happiness is about, but very important.
Yeah, and I think the starting point is self-awareness. So that inner voice in your head, that is the sort of spokesperson for either self-acceptance or self-criticism. We all have that inner voice, but we're not well trained sometimes to listen to it.
Yeah.
And it has such a big impact on us. And so if listeners are thinking about how do I get on board a little bit, I think a good starting point is to be self-aware of what that inner voice is telling yourself about yourself when you're faced with criticism, lack of achievement, poor body image, people just just having a hard time, you don't have enough money to do everything you want with your kids or whatever, is that inner voice, at what point, how quickly does it start to hit yourself over the head and put yourself down? Once you are aware of it, then based on what I've talked about today, you have a choice and a power to change that voice and to take stock of who you are as a person and to appreciate the positive things that you do have about yourself.
Yeah.
To accept yourself the way you are. You are, the way you are, because that's the way you are. So just accept it.
Yeah.
And if things are not going well, get that inner voice inside of you to accept yourself as a fallible human being, but someone who has lots of positive qualities as well, and just to accept who you are as a person, and then you'll find it much easier to navigate the waves, so self-acceptance is a simple idea that you can choose to have or not.
Yeah.
And that's your listener's choice. They can choose to evaluate their self-worth. That's their choice.
Yeah.
And that's a slippery slope. It's a roller coaster.
It is.
Because when you're flying high, you think of yourself as great.
Yeah.
Then when you tumble down, back to no good Nick do you become. And so that's one choice you can, but it's a very slippery slope of unhappiness, happiness, unhappiness, happiness. The choice you can make is really to, as much as possible, avoid the self-evaluation, recognizing that you're that basket of fruit. And what part of you are you going to use to evaluate your overall self-worth? And even if you go, it's the peaches today, but maybe in a year's time you go, I don't like peaches anymore. What are you going to do then? So the simple idea is to choose not to evaluate your self-worth based on external events.
Yeah.
And just accept yourself.
Look inwards.
And accept who you are.
Yeah.
You are who you are because that's the way you are.
Yeah.
So it's a simple idea. It's a choice you can make. It makes a big difference to your happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that's actions and steps that we could take and things that anyone and everyone could see, even though, we don't necessarily go deep into the research. But now let's talk a bit more about the research side of things, because you have a whole book on this, right? And you mentioned Albert Ellis earlier, and I also understand that you also use rational emotive behavior therapy.
Good for you.
REBT. REBT?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely a new terminology for me. So how different is this theory from other theories, and how would you simplify it for the everyday listener?
Shakespeare once wrote that things are neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And Epictetus was a Stoic Roman philosopher who over 2,000 years ago wrote that people are not affected by events, but by the view they take of events. So rational emotive behavior therapy is therapy for people that have mental health diagnosable issues, as well as those that are just troubled emotionally, but maybe are not diagnosable. It's a form of cognitive behavior therapy, which is probably the most preferred best practice in helping people with mental health issues improve. CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, they're the same family. And what the research shows is twofold. One is that there is a pattern of thinking, cognition, cognitive activity that's crook, that we all have, unscientific. We blow things out of proportion. We see things in black and white. We take things personally.
Yeah.
We exaggerate how bad things are. That we're all, our humanness, unfortunately, in terms of the way the mind develops, it develops in two different ways, which people don't know about. And one way it develops from a very early age is it's in the negative way. Negative emotions and the way we think about things disturb ourselves. And then there's the other side of thinking, which is a more scientific, objective, reasonable, moderate, flexible, adaptable, not extreme, unrelenting, harsh ways of extreme ways of thinking. Each of us has these dual tendencies, and the research is very clear that and this applies to people of all ages. I've done research with kids in school, but there's research with adults.
Yeah.
So that people that have anxiety and depression and anger problems, when you look at their thinking, they're much more extreme than people that don't have anxiety, depression, anger. The way they think is quite, you could call it irrational, but really what that means is unrealistic, inflexible, demanding, and so the research as well as the therapy says that if you can make people aware of the way they think, show them that their emotional issues come not so much from what's happening to them at work or at home, but their mindset, their mental makeup, the way they think about their beliefs towards what's happening. If you can make people aware of their thinking and make them aware of errors in their thinking,
Yeah.
Extreme ways of thinking, and get them to cognitively restructure those ways of thinking into thinking that's more reasonable,
Yeah. So
less
more
emotional,
rational.
more rational,
Yeah.
has a big impact on their emotions. And so when you go to the home of psychology and psychiatry, and you look up what's the best practice for helping people with mental health disorders,
Yeah.
therapeutically, what's the most powerful method around, or methods or type of therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, top of the list.
There we go. Something new today. Definitely different from what you hear, on the radio or on Spotify. There we go. And I think in the book, you might have also mentioned, as far as I'm aware, unconditional self-acceptance.
Aha.
Yeah. How about that?
How about that?
Yeah. How about that? How do we know that we have that, or how do we achieve that?
Or what is it?
Yeah. What is it even?
Well, I accept myself normally, but there's a few areas that I don't.
Yeah.
There's a few areas where I put myself down. Normally, I'm self-accepting. I don't care, what most people think about me.
Yeah.
Although there's one person that I work for whose opinion really matters to me, and I take it personally.
Yeah.
So I'm generally self-accepting, but there's certain conditions where I'm not. So that's conditional self-acceptance.
Right.
Unconditional self-acceptance is I accept myself no matter what, under all circumstances. And that's the sizzle. That's the one that separates those that have it from those that don't.
Yeah. It's like the next level, isn't it? It's a bit different from what we discussed before. We talked about, giving yourself affirmations and accept things as they are, but we didn't mention the conditional part, because sometimes we forget that we accept ourselves with conditions. Even if some of us might say that, yeah, I have self-acceptance. Of course, I accept myself as I am. But when you mentioned that, I realized that there might be situation, and listeners might be able to do this at home when they reflect on past situations or things that have happened, and really take a moment and think about the self-acceptance in those situations. Did that self-acceptance just come naturally, or did you actually put some sort of conditions on top? That would be a different kind of exercise to try.
Well, I mentioned that skier, Jakara Anthony, I think.
The Olympics
The
lady?
Olympic skier
Yeah.
said, I know my results don't determine my self-worth.
Yeah.
But what about people's approval?
Yeah. There are other conditions, right?
And so for her to have full self-acceptance, she'd have to say
Unconditional self-acceptance.
unconditional. She'd have to say people's opinions of me don't determine my self-worth. And then you go, what about your body image? And she'll go, when I'm look at myself in the mirror, I'm so hard on myself, I put myself down. And you go, so you don't have unconditional. So it's not easy. First of all, you got to understand what it is, but then you've got to apply it in those situations that matter most. And that's where it's really hard to take it on board. But once you can do that, even if you've segmented into themes, use your term, achievement, relationships, and I'll put in the body image.
Yeah.
You can decide which area do I take things most personally when they're going wrong.
Yeah.
And you might go all of them, or you might go achievement, or depending on which one, is current at your in your stage of life. So you can actually work on developing conditional self-acceptance in an area, which is good. But it just means that your emotional life will still be handicapped because the psychological armor isn't covering all spears and arrows. It's just covering the achievement or the body image. And if we can bring up our kids to, be able to shrug off all of them, knowing that I need to find out why they're being shot at me and improve myself.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to take achievement or approval or rejection and body image personally, because I'm just not going to judge myself anymore. It's just a hopeless, confusing, stupid thing to be doing. What am I going to do? Is it the peaches or is it the bananas that I want to use to judge myself on? And you realize, that's the important thing. Once you realize it doesn't make sense, it's so arbitrary what it is you're going to use to judge your self-worth.
Yeah.
Albert Ellis would say the Martians, if they came down to Earth and listened to the way people thought, would die laughing.
Oh my God.
Why would you possibly take something personally? Just doesn't make, it doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so the elegant preferred philosophy of life is unconditional self-acceptance.
Yeah.
But even conditional self-acceptance can afford you great benefits in particular areas. And if there's one of those themes that are really bugging you and are really grabbing at your emotional strings, partly because possibly, like with me, it's not the body image because I'm, as you can see, a very fit and so I like when I look in the mirror, I'm going, yeah, baby.
Yeah,
just bring
absolutely.
it. So there's no problem there.
Yeah, already perfect.
And in my work, I'm such a superstar.
Yeah, absolutely.
That
Stellar.
I never get any arrows in that area, but I get hell from people and disapproval from people. I'm just kidding, by the way. That's my New York humor about those other things.
No, you gotta keep it going. Don't do that disclaimer. Come on.
But
we're having fun here.
But if I come to you and say, I'm feeling so bad about my relationships with my family and friends, and I've lost a few friends, and people are just critical of me, and it just drags me through the mud. Then if you help me be more accepting of myself, it can help me in that theme area.
Yeah.
Then we'll work on the other ones until we kind of build ourselves up in all areas of our life.
Yeah.
And it's probably not a bad way of thinking about how to develop unconditional self-acceptance is, some people, once they get it across all themes.
Yeah.
And for some people, they go, okay, let's just work in the area that's of greatest concern, and we'll work on the next one, and they build themselves up that way.
Yeah. It's a slow burn process, isn't it? Like you said, some people just get...
No, but for them, it's not slow.
Yeah.
For 20% of people, I don't know, I'm just pulling figures out of the air. Once they hear this talk or read, they'll go, oh, gosh, I get it. I'm not going to calculate my self-worth anymore based on external stuff. It doesn't make sense. And they just let it all go.
That's true.
let it all go.
Yeah.
And I think maybe people that are more emotionally inclined, it's a slower process.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's higher than 20%. You know, those who could just grab unconditional self-acceptance straight away and, you know, have it, great. But, you know, for the others, you know, if they still need to work on it, but perhaps I'm one of them, you know, if we need to work on it in steps, that's okay too.
Yes.
Because we know what it is now. We've learned what it is. We have the tools, like you were saying earlier, all the tools we've learned from today, and step by step we'll get there.
And guess what? Lots of opportunities to practice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That's it. Every day you can practice it. That's when I say every day. You know, in some sense, we goof up more frequently in doing stuff.
Yeah.
Because of, you know, we're just not 100% polished and perfected, and we get lazy, and we have our own idiosyncrasies, and plus the world around us, as some of you may have noticed, can be pretty creepy and makes it hard to know and unpredictable.
Yeah.
So on a daily basis, I'm just trying to think about I can think I didn't do something that my wife asked me to do, so she had to do it. It was just changing a battery in an alarm system so she could go out with some security in her hand. I was going to do it today or tomorrow, but I procrastinated. And then I was late to a meeting, podcast, which was bad. And then
might have happened today, but it's okay.
That's
We're here.
Two things. And I think I got annoyed with someone. So let's say there were 2 or 3 things that didn't go so well today.
Yeah.
And they were all opportunities to practice self-acceptance.
Yeah.
If I needed to, but when I'm thinking about it, they didn't impact me.
Yeah.
And I'm really good now. I've really got to be, I'm just trying to think. It's certainly in the relationship area where I find it, at a certain point, something can affect me.
Yeah.
I can put myself down. In terms of my lifestyle and looking after myself, I've recently crossed that line up until a certain point, I was self-accepting.
Yeah.
And then after a while, I stopped being self-accepting. And as I said, it's actually helped me a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, literally countless examples of situations where you weren't at your best or you're getting negative stuff coming in.
Yeah.
To practice self-acceptance almost every day.
Yeah.
And just go, I'm not going to put myself down.
Yeah.
You know, about this, I still have my good points. I accept myself no matter what. Write down a few affirmations, practice it, get it going. And you know what? I'll give you another practice just because I'm starting to relax.
You're just starting to relax.
Just kidding.
Yeah, let's do it.
Teach it to someone else what self-acceptance is and what unconditional self-acceptance is. And it has a big impact on your own. Because you got to explain it to them.
Yep.
And then you get it.
Yep.
So that's
a great one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll save the best until, is it last or no? We still...
Almost there. Almost there. But yeah, it is a really good one. I think it's kind of similar to when I read books and I have to tell someone about it so I don't forget about what I've learned from the book.
Exactly.
So similar to that, this practice today has been great to learn more about. It's not as simple as I initially thought, to be honest. So for me to tell somebody else about it today after we finish this recording, I'll remember it better. So the final thing we do want to touch on with you about your book, The Strength of Self-Acceptance, is you mentioned irrational and rational happiness. And today we're talking about self-acceptance and happiness. We would love to understand more about the insights in this area. And also, if you would love to leave us with any final tips for the day.
The terms irrational and rational apply to thinking, feeling, and behaving, the intersection of those three things, because thinking and feeling and behaving, they're all interactional. So you have one, but then you have the other, and then you have the other. And so you have that triad. And that those can be characterized both as irrational, which is the thinking that's extreme, rigid, inflexible, blowing things out of proportion, taking things personally, which leads to extreme feelings, self-defeating behavior,
Yep.
and low happiness. And then you have the more of a reasonable, rational triad of thinking, where you go, well, I'd prefer people to approve of me, and I prefer to be successful in what I do, but when I'm not, I'm still a worthwhile person.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away my self-worth.
Yeah.
And then your feelings when things aren't going well are not as extreme.
Yeah.
And then your behavior is still can switch it on, or you don't sort of drop out for too long a time before you come back.
Yeah.
So the book itself covers self-acceptance in religion and in philosophy and in different therapies and its applications. So it's a broad canvas. It's not a practical book. It's just more over the years, how have people studied it, and there's a chapter on research.
Yeah.
So for listeners who are interested, it's a Springer Press publication, Strength of Self-Acceptance, last name spelled Bernard. That's my sense of humor. And I think that would be interesting for people is just to read about. There is a book I would recommend, though, in all seriousness, and it's called.
It'll come to you.
Hold on. The subtitle is The Legacy of Albert Ellis. I think it's called Rationality in the Pursuit of Happiness.
Rationality and the Pursuit of Happiness. There we go.
The Legacy of Albert Ellis.
Yeah.
That would be, if someone goes, this stuff is really interesting, that's the book I would get.
Yeah.
Because in the book, it covers the theory. And it also covers and illustrates the role of both irrational and rational, covering, like one chapter is on marital problems, and one chapter is on work problems, and one chapter is on parenting, and one chapter's on sexuality, and one chapter's on death and dying. And it covers a lot of, and in the chapter, when Albert Ellis was alive many years ago, he used to tape record his sessions with clients that presented with all these problems. Back when people were tape recording.
Yep.
And he gave me 100 of his tapes.
Oh.
And I listened to them all.
Wow.
And I had transcribed the best of Albert Ellis.
Yeah.
Applying his theory. It's in that book.
Yep.
With my descriptions of what's going on to make them understandable.
Yep.
And that's probably, that's a great read. It's better than the Strength of Self-Acceptance, which is more of an academic book.
Yeah.
This is quite an interesting, valuable read. And I know all this so well because listening to Albert, the sessions, whether they were tape recorded public lectures or therapy sessions, I got it.
Yeah.
And
listen to them all.
And it's in the head, and it's there. So I would say that would be a recommendation.
Yeah.
And
fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think really I would just say to people that if you're interested in this area, get that book. I'm not pushing the book, but it's a good, like if you go, what was that? I'd like to know more about it. Rationality in the Pursuit of Happiness. It's a John Wiley publication. I did it. Would be a good book to have in your library.
Yeah, I might check it out, actually. It sounds very interesting. Thank you. So that is our take today on self-acceptance and happiness. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot more to learn. There's definitely a lot to practice every single day, whether you have unconditional self-acceptance or not. I think it's a continual journey. It's never going to stop. So, thank you for sharing your insights on this particular topic today. It's your expert area. You just lit up when you talked about it. So that was great. And we...
You mean I changed from being basically a faceless, expressionless, dull person that you were thinking, oh, this is going to be the hardest thing because he looks like I'm going to have to do all this hard work. And then I don't think there's going to be any way I'm going to get anything positive out of this, but okay, let's bring in another expert. You mean, in fact, I did light up and energize it a little bit for you? I'm so glad.
I think we could take this joke really far, we'd close it off. But I mean, for context listeners, Michael got lost before we did the recording. I had to go find him, but it was good. We had a nice walk along the water before we came into the recording studio. We had a good laugh. We had a good chat. It was good.
Yeah.
So, lots of self-acceptance practiced, for the both of us before we walked into the studio, I think. Yeah. I think it was great. But I do want to, before let you go, close with two things. Number one, we would love to know about something that is not related to self-acceptance, not related to happiness, just something that you're, as a human, are really passionate about.
I think justice and fairness and just I get really concerned about people's willingness to act in their own self-interest to the harm of others.
Yeah.
And I see that selfishness and lack of community-mindedness is sort of a new trend. In the States, it's obviously become, really a horrible situation.
Sadly.
I think Australia is much better at everyone working together for a common cause and not being not discriminating. I mean, there's still issues that we need to work on with the way we treat minority groups. So I think that I'm very conscious and interested in that human condition and working in my own way to help people accept each other and communicate and coexist.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But I've also noticed that, the acceptance part, perhaps that's also related to self-acceptance too, right?
Well, I think it's, as I said earlier, other acceptance. And, we're so quick to judge other people.
Yeah.
You almost have to stop yourself from looking at someone and not judging them.
Yeah.
Because once you judge people, it's very hard to peacefully coexist because basically you don't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah.
And so the challenge of other acceptance, I think in its own way is, in some ways it's more difficult than self-acceptance, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah, definitely. But I feel like it starts with self-acceptance because, it starts from within and then you bring it out to the community, and that's so important nowadays. So that's a really great message, and thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for joining us, especially for coming into the studio, even though it was a bit of a lost and found situation.
You mean, are you talking about the interview?
Yeah. We had fun. We certainly had fun.
Yeah, it was good. And so nicely interviewed, by the way.
Thank you.
You did a really good job. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back sometimes. You've been listening to Sero Boost, the Happiness Science Insights podcast, produced by the Happiness Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at ha.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.